Hello there, sword fans. Something of a different video today. I'm going to talk about Ichimonji kitchen knives, and I typically talk about swords, obviously, and so kitchen knives are well out of my comfort zone, but I do cook a lot, or at least my wife does, and sometimes I help by chopping things up or sharpening knives. So I have some experience with chef knives, but I'm certainly not a professional chef. Keep that in mind as you hear my babbling. Also note that these are free review samples. I got them for free from Ichimonji. If you think that makes me biased, you know at the start. So story goes that Ichimonji reached out to me. Hopefully I'm incidentally saying their name correctly, and if you're interested in buying one, links and all that are in the description down below. Anyway, they reached out to me and asked, hey, would you like to review something? I said yes. They sent me a list of all the different things that I could check out, and I made a slight deviation from that and requested 3 knives of the same size in a Gyuto format, and my intention initially was to show a knife that was about $100, $200, and then $300. They have knives that go well beyond that cost, but to show what you kind of get in the differences of a similar knife of a similar size. Unfortunately, between Christmas sales or holiday sales, as well as the fact that I didn't get exactly what I asked for, that threw that story out the window. But I do have 3 knives of 240mm size, all with Western handles and some slight differences in steel. And so hopefully it shows you at least what you get in terms of differences between these things, which are all between $100 and $200 depending on the sale prices. So hopefully it's helpful. So the first knife I'll talk about is the VG-10 knife, and that is my wife's favorite. I'm putting it at the front because I think it's the one that most people are going to like. Links and all that, prices and all that in the description down below. It seems to depend on the sale, but it's around about $100, $150. And basically, even though the grip appears mostly the same as the other knives, this one seemed to fit well in my wife's hands. I can't say that I like the grip on this the most, but my wife did. She does most of the cooking, so I default to her. Also, it didn't rust or chip or do anything. It did everything that you would hope the knife would do. It cut through all the things really well. We cut on a cutting board. We weren't particularly aggressive with it, but chopped chickens and pineapples and did most of the things that you would do. The knife is held up. I've put a grinometer to it, and the overall, the edge beveling on it is pretty consistent and good. I don't see any real deviations. From a manufacturing standpoint, it overall seems well made, and it's held an edge well. We've been using it over the last couple months. Anyway, I say that I'm putting this one up at the front and that it probably wins the contest if there were such a thing for the little lineup we have here. But the notable features for us is that it doesn't rust. It seems to hold an edge really well, and it fit really well in my wife's hands. She has much smaller hands than I do. Since she does most of the cooking, this would be, if I got to choose one to buy for a holiday gift, then it would probably be this one right here. Now, the rusting is an important thing. A lot of folks that don't invest in kitchen knives probably take for granted that they do, but we've had some carbon steel knives, and if you're chopping fruit or veggies or something like that and the knife rusts by the time you get around to washing it, that's a deterrent and something that we haven't enjoyed so much. This one hasn't had that problem. We've been neglectful in the cleaning side of things, just not neglectful in terms of like chopping directly on the granite countertop. This one hasn't had that one, at least yet. Anyway, point is that it's held up overall really well, and I think it's an impressive knife. Me personally, I didn't have the problem. My wife tends to favor a pinch grip. I tend to hold this a little bit more dumbly and put my thumb on the back, and for whatever reason, this is how I hold it. But anyway, pinch grips are fine. If I go further down the handle, it's fine. But if I sneak my finger up on this choil, it's not chamfered in such a way that it's terribly comfortable. It's got a little bit of a ledge on it, more than I personally like. It hasn't cut me, bit me, done anything bad, but it's just not kind of the lazy boy recliner of grips that I would like. It fits reasonably well in my hand, but it wasn't the most comfortable for me. Now, the basic gist of the VG10 steel here is that it does what it needs to do. It's known to be a very good knife steel. It holds up well, it's corrosion resistant, it's reasonably easy to sharpen, and holds an edge pretty well. I haven't had to sharpen or done anything with this knife that's going to diminish it substantially, but overall it's done all the things that I would expect a VG10 knife to do. I haven't talked a lot about the handle though. Now, this has compressed plywood handle, which doesn't sound particularly glamorous, and this has a really nice, pretty blue purplish color to it. They say it's got a silver brim on it. It's made to look like a bolster. There are some spots where I can see that it doesn't appear to be completely connected, but overall the manufacturing quality appears pretty good. Anything I could gripe about is very, very small. Overall though, it just has a handsome appearance, especially up close. I like the 3 kind of brushed nickel pegs that run through it. I believe that's what they are. I like the overall appearance. I wish it was an actual bolster. At the same time, I can't complain about how it feels. Now, I did note that this knife wasn't my favorite grip, but I don't want that to make you think I think it's bad. Overall, there were very subtle nuances in terms of the differences between the three knives that I had. This one, if I'm being nitpicky, was my least favorite, but I'd still consider it a very competent grip, nothing to complain about. I'd certainly be happy with it, but if I get to choose between the other two, this was my least favorite and my wife's favorite. Now, the most comfortable grip was the Tokko. That's this one. Hopefully, again, I'm saying it right. Now, this is made out of a carbon steel that supposedly can rust. I haven't had a problem. We've been a little bit neglectful in terms of cleaning, as in we'll cut fruit and veggies and stuff like that, and then have dinner and then clean up afterwards. So a few hours later, we'll get around to cleaning it. I haven't seen any rusting. There's some minor spotting on the surface of the knife, but not anything rusty, not anything bad. And I live in an area with hard water, so that's common to see. I do wipe it down with a little bit of oil, like an avocado oil or something like that. Whatever oil I happen to have around from cooking, I wipe it down quickly, and it seems to have held up. But I was told that this can rust, so I've done the additional step of putting oil on it when I'm done, but it hasn't rusted. Some kitchen knives that I've had rust while I'm cooking with them, if they're really, really high carbon steel content, or the composition of that steel doesn't favor not rusting. Anyway, that hasn't been a problem here. I was a little nervous it would be, but hasn't been a problem. It's held up really well. Again, I hooked it up or ran it through a grinometer tool to measure the bevels on the edge. Everything seems really consistent across all the knives. Frankly, they all have really clean edges with consistent angles on them. Also, the grip on this one, though I mentioned, was my favorite. This one, for whatever reason, feels a little nicer. I like this bolster area, that it doesn't seem to be, well, it seems to be an actual bolster rather than like scales or something put on the side. It appears sealed, and that's a quality thing that I like. It doesn't feel any different in a pinch grip or anything like that, as well as the little choil down here. This area is still on the more uncomfortable side. It's not chamfered or rounded in such a way that it feels particularly comfortable in my hand when I hold it like this, but something about the grip here makes me hold it just a little bit lower rather than climbing up on the grip so much. Anyway, the general grip, I happen to like this one the most. There's just little subtle nuances in terms of the grip differences between these knives that can play a difference. All of them feel comfortable, though. I don't want to say that any of them are uncomfortable. All of them are comfortable in any of my hands or my wife's hands. We didn't have problems manipulating them, but as I'm thinking about the subtle differences between them, which one do I prefer? That would be this one right here. The idea of it rusting, though, gives me some pause. Maybe the edge will hold up better. Maybe there's something about this steel that'll be more resilient, or maybe you're just looking for a carbon steel knife and don't mind the added step of needing to clean it or keep it in some kind of oil. In my case, though, having to worry about that is a bit of a bother, and that means that me personally, I wouldn't choose this one. It looks pretty plain. I'm sure as a tool it's quite good, but like the folded steels and all that other kind of cool stuff, that makes me want to go through the step of having to clean it. Having a plain knife that I also have to oil, it seems like another chore in the kitchen for me, and it's just not for me personally. But I will admit, I like the grip on this one the most. All the profiles of the knives, incidentally, are about the same. So that's why I tried to get something a little different. All of them also seem to have some differences in grip and in general construction, but the knife, the edge profiles, the general geometry, all are pretty consistent. It's really the steels they're made from and the hilt. Like I said, this one, the bolster is in one piece rather than two, or it doesn't appear to be scales. The handle's just a little bit fatter, but none of the choils are particularly smooth. So that might just be a thing, a facet of Ichimonji knives that is present in the way they manufacture, at least the knives that I have. Now, the Tokko steel is supposed to be a semi-stainless steel, and they don't list exactly what kind of steel it is, but at the same time, I haven't had any problems with it staining. There's very minor blemishes on the blade after using it, though honestly the scuffs that my sponge leaves are really more prevalent than the stains that might be left over from some sort of rust or corrosion. It doesn't have problems, and if that's a concern to you, I can say that I was semi-neglectful as much as this is a semi-stainless knife. I cut fruit and veggies and then waited till after dinner to wash up, but I didn't leave it out for days. I didn't put it in a dishwasher. I didn't do any of the other things that a person might consider abusive. The steel has held up. It's overall very pretty. It doesn't look like a dirty, rusty knife after using it. If that's a concern for you, then I can tell you that it hasn't been problematic with what I've done. At the same time, I would personally choose a knife that is even less likely to rust. So the VG-10 and the Damascus steel are options that I think I would prefer a little bit more, just knowing I don't have to worry about it. Now, this blade also notes a compressed plywood handle. I don't see the same nuances and detail. It appears more or less to be a black handle. The subtle differences in terms of shaping here. This is a little thinner in one dimension, a little wider in the other, and that's why it fit my hand. But we're talking about like a millimeter or less of difference between these dimensions. It's funny what a subtle difference that can make. I did have to measure them to make sure I wasn't being crazy or something, and then there was a difference. And there's very subtle differences between the handles. At the same time, I like this one just a little bit more in terms of the overall grip on it. But I digress. The compressed plywood handle doesn't have the same kind of elegant look. If you look at it up close, it doesn't have that deep purple look, but the bolster is an actual bolster, and it doesn't appear to have the same kind of gaps and openings. It feels a little nicer on the pinch grip if I'm being particular about it. Anyway, overall, the Tokko is a very nice knife. If you were considering it but turned off maybe about the potential of rust, I can tell you that it's at least wasn't an issue for me thus far. The third one I'll talk about is probably the one that I would put at the head of the pack. My wife won because her word is law, but this is the one that I think is maybe the coolest, and that is this Sanmai or Sazanami. I can't necessarily say the name correctly. It has a very similar handle to the Tokko that I liked, but it just feels a little bit different. I can also make out the bolster over here appears to be scales rather than a bolster. And for whatever reason, the choil on this one is the smoothest. It's still, if I really choke up on it, it's still not particularly comfortable, but at the same time, if I run my finger over it, this one feels smoother than the others. Again, edge profile seems about the same as I run the edge measuring device over it. It's held up really well. We've cut with all of these at various times throughout the last few months, and I don't have a problem with any edge. I don't have a problem with any rusting, and overall they've been a fun experience to use. But this one is pretty. It's just really, really pretty looking. It has this kind of hammered surface to it. It has folding patterns in the steel, and I can make out some lamination line where there's presumably a core steel of a harder type at the center of the edge. And it's just a wonderful pattern to look at. So I was hoping to get a more expensive knife with some of this patterning that was made out of a carbon steel, a little bit more traditional. That's not the case here, but it's just, there's a lot of features in this knife. I think it looks really cool, and it's also quite comfortable. So this is the one I found myself using the most, just because I'm a sucker for the folding. But I see some, something kind of carved into the side. This isn't etched. There's some sort of metal carving in here, and that the signature or name or whatever this happens to be is carved in, or maybe stamped in. But in any case, it's left impressions in the metal. There's the hammered surface. There's all of the details that I've already outlined. Anyway, it's a beautiful knife. It's pretty to look at, and that's what has made it fun for me. So, and this, if I'm thinking about like a gift for the holidays kind of thing, this is just a spectacular looking knife. In terms of grip, it doesn't feel bad. I would say that it doesn't have the same grip as the Tokko, but I like this more than the VG10. It's the other knife that my wife liked a little bit more, even though the grips don't look all that much different. They don't feel all that much different. I would say this is in the middle of the pack for me. The prettiness is really the factor. And initially, when I was looking at these knives and thinking about making a review, the price point I think was closer to $200, and now, or at least when I looked last, it was closer to $100 on sale. So the point is, I think you can get this at a sale price, and as like a holiday gift or somebody interested in getting a kitchen knife. There's just a lot of features here. Previously, I typically default to a shun knife, and it has a D-shaped grip, which has been really comfortable. But as I've used these, I've found that this grip is equally comfortable and don't have any problems with it. It certainly stays locked in my hand, and the aesthetics on here stand out a little bit more boldly than the Shun Classic, which is what I've typically used. A lot of manufacturers offer similar things, but when I saw this for $100, I was like, well, hell, this seems totally worth it. It's very stunning to look at. The edge came super sharp. It's held up really well, and I don't know, I think you just get a lot of features here, and it would be kind of a stunning thing. Incidentally, talking about kind of holiday gift time stuff, when I opened the box, I didn't think thoroughly about recording. Anyway, it's not the greatest stuff, but they came wrapped in some holiday type paper, and it seemed an easy thing. The overall presentation when they were from the factory in wrap was actually pretty nice. They came in like a little present. They had little cards explaining what's up. I thought overall the packaging presentation wasn't so much that I thought I was paying a whole lot for packaging, but as kind of a holiday gift idea, fit right in, and it wasn't bland. It was a fun opening experience, I guess I'll say. There is one feature on the other knives that is missing from this one, and it's easy to overlook, and that has to do with the tang. This one has a different shaped tang. It's smaller, it doesn't run all the way through the handle like it does on the other knives, and it's a nuance that probably doesn't really have much impact in terms of usability. At least I didn't notice it. Frankly, I almost overlooked it while I was doing this review, but it's worth noting that a superior construction would be having a full tang run all the way through. This is perfectly sufficient, and frankly, a concession I would make given the other features it has. This is the least expensive of the knives at the moment. It's right now on sale at the time of recording this for $104, making this, to my eyes anyway, one of the more feature-rich knives in terms of the folding and patterning on it. And it captures a lot of the same benefits as the VG10. It has a compressed plywood handle. Upon closer inspection, you can make out a little bit more of the details. It has a kind of grayish black patterning to it. Admittedly, I like the purplish look a little bit more. I think it stands out. It has a little bit more contrast on the eye. But the same silver pegs run through it. It's just a very pretty knife overall. And the more I handle it, it's just, I stop while I'm cooking to look at it and say, like, this is just such a pretty knife. It just makes the experience fun. So if you are a person that has many cooking knives to choose from that are equally beautiful, then perhaps it doesn't strike you the same way. But for me, kitchen knives have primarily been a utility, and I rarely get one that has as much visual appeal as this does. And I will admit that it's a fun experience, and my wife stops and looks at it. It's a fun little nuance to have a beautiful looking kitchen knife, but at the same time, it does all the things that you would expect the knife to do. It's cut well, it's held up well. I don't have any problems or critiques about how good or bad it's done. For a brand new razor sharp kitchen knife, it's done all the things well. And now I haven't abused it. I haven't pushed it to failure. I haven't cut on granite. I haven't whacked it into a metal pole. I don't think that would be terribly useful with a kitchen knife. What I have done though is, again, after dinner, waited to clean it. I see absolutely nothing on the surface of the steel that would indicate that it's rusted or diminished at all. Part of that is that there's a lot of erratic kind of patterns on the knife, and so even if there were, it would be obscured quite a bit just by the general patterning. Anyway, it has a beautiful natural look to it. I really happen to think that this is a handsome knife, and if there were one I was going to keep out, I think it would be this. It's just so cool looking. And anyway, at $100, being the least expensive, the most feature-rich, and kind of in the middle of the road in terms of my feeling on the grip. Well, like I said, the feelings are subtle differences in the grip. All of them feel quite good. This just seems to be the winner for my money. It's the least expensive. It's also made out of very good steel, and it holds up well. It's got a great shape, and it's so packed in beautiful little nuanced artistic features that I would hands down pick this one myself. But my opinion doesn't necessarily matter on this. The VG10 would be the one we'd probably keep out because that's the one my wife likes. Anyway, all the knives have held out. I really hope that, well, I didn't hope. I left room in case one of them didn't hold up or rusted or did something dumb or was uncomfortable, but honestly, all of them were really subtle differences between what we liked and what we don't like. It was only by narrow measures that one stood apart from the other, and it was just a wonderful experience playing with them and using them. Well, not playing with them, but using them for cooking. I really enjoyed it. All right, sword friends, that's all the information I can share with you. Unfortunately, it's not a lot, but I'm not a professional chef, and I don't talk about chef's knives a whole lot. So hopefully the gist that I could give you was helpful. I showed you my wife's favorite, my favorite, some of the differences between these knives and similar price points, more details and all that kind of stuff, as well as links in the description down below. Thank you to Ichimonji Knives for sending these my way to review. If anyone has any questions or wants me to see anything different in a follow-up video, let me know, and I will endeavor to include it in future content. That's all I've got. Cheers, and thanks for watching.